Welcome to Guns, Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. The House Judiciary Committee voted on sending HJ Resolution 144 to the floor for a vote which would overturn a recent ATF rule, Representative Massie explains.
This resolution seeks to protect the rights of law-abiding gun owners and collectors by nullifying the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives rule about what constitutes being, quote, engaged in the business, unquote, of dealing firearms to require an individual to obtain a federal firearms license.
Personal file, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
The Democrats do not want this to pass because they like the ambiguous ATF rule.
We can choose to change our nation's laws to reduce gun violence and save lives.
Except the laws you pass don't ever focus on reducing gun violence.
They will say that the ATF is exceeding its authority, but they know that the ATF was required to update its regulations to align with the mandate we gave them when we passed the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year.
As justification for its overreach, ATF cited the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. ATF relies on this slight modification to draw the conclusion that, quote, even a single firearm transaction or offer to engage in a transaction, when combined with other evidence, may be sufficient to require a license, unquote, as an FFL. Think about that. Selling one gun makes you engaged in the business of selling firearms. Sounds ridiculous to me.
They will say that this ATF rule will target hobbyist gun sellers, but they know the rule explicitly says, quote, individuals who purchase firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or a legitimate hobby are permitted by the Gun Control Act to occasionally buy and sell firearms for those purposes.
Nothing in the foregoing text suggests that the term, quote, personal collection, unquote, does not include firearms accumulated primarily for personal protection. Yet that is exactly what the final rule asserts.
They will say this ATF rule violates American Second Amendment rights, but they know that the rule expressly says, quote, nothing in this rule shall be construed as precluding a person from lawfully acquiring a firearm for self-protection or other lawful personal use.
So the unconstitutional rule says that it is constitutional. Case closed, I guess.
They will say that this rule will be used to prosecute innocent people.
But he says that the ATF has flipped the statute on its head by requiring that firearm owners prove innocence rather than the government prove guilt. This is like some dystopian future.
That ATF Director Stephen Dettelbach testified before this committee in May that, quote, the most common type of firearms trafficking now is dealing firearms for profits without a license.
If you're trafficking firearms already, I'm pretty certain by definition you are doing it without a license.
Republicans won't tell you that this is part of a broader effort to make all firearms and firearms accessories widely available without a background check. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court, stacked with Republican appointees, struck down the ATF's rule on bump stocks, allowing the accessory used in the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history to be available once again to the public without even a background check.
Bump stocks clearly did not fit the definition of machine guns per the law passed by Congress. The ATF redefined it to capture bump stocks as machine guns without new legislation, which is why it was struck down, since the language of the law passed by Congress has more merit than rules created by the ATF, just like, this rule they are debating. Lady McBath also wants the ATF to keep this rule in place.
But for far too long, when someone knew that they couldn't get a gun from one of these sellers because they would fail the background check, they had many places to turn. They could turn to the internet.
Online sales would already be illegal without a background check.
This legislation meant that the ATF had to issue a new rule to determine who is engaged in the business of selling firearms. And under this rule, all gun sellers will be held to the same standard.
She noticeably said gun sellers and not gun dealers, and there is a difference. Gun dealers are required to get a license, And with the new rule, you may be a gun dealer if you even try to sell one gun, even though supposedly even under this rule you can sell some firearms under certain circumstances, maybe, and not need a license. In all honesty, they want you to be too afraid to sell anything without a license and want to keep it vague so they can prosecute whomever they want.
This resolution would weaken that law, reopen the black market, and only benefit those that are seeking to do harm or profit from gun violence.
Even a judge has recognized that this rule is so poorly written, or maybe it's written this way on purpose, that somebody just by merely advertising a gun could be declared to be a gun dealer if they didn't have a license at the time.
He's exactly right. It harms people who may want to sell a single firearm from their collection, but are worried about this new rule.
The rule helps gun sellers know how to act responsibly and legally. Specifically, it helps clarify when they need an FFL license and when they need to run a background check. Repealing the ATF rule makes the law less clear.
As has already been pointed out, this law makes it extremely unclear, and the previous wording was more clear than the gobbledygook nonsense the ATF put out with the rule in question.
When it comes to gun violence policy, you're either for our kids or you're for their killers.
Wow, a perfectly reasonable and not inflammatory statement meant to play on emotions.
Do you talk to the people who you represent? Do you listen to their concerns? Who is asking for this?
Well, of course I know him. He's me.
Because the guy has now had 2 assassination attempts on his life, armed to the teeth with an assault rifle.
First of all, it was, even though it's not material to the debate today, the other side of the aisle felt inclined to say that the second assassination attempt on President Trump was done with an assault rifle. The problem with that assertion is that the rifle that was used doesn't have the features, the cosmetic features that the Democrats have used in their legislation to define an assault rifle. So this points out the futility of the legislation on the other side of the aisle, or maybe what it points out is actually their true intention, which is that they don't want to ban just what they call assault rifles. They want to ban virtually every rifle.
Now, I would like to think that I serve in this distinguished body with smart people.
You serious?
And it has to be noted and emphasized that voting for this resolution will prevent ATF from issuing further regulations in this space.
And your point about it's not actually an assault weapon, it is an AR-style weapon.
Not a chance.
The person that had the weapon had a prior record of, one was, I think it was called a weapon of mass destruction. And he had other offenses too. So my first thought when I saw that was, how did he get his hands on this?
Well, it's good to see the gun laws on the books already work so well. Might as well burden Americans with more of them.
I mean, I was a kid going to school, we had fire drills. Now they have active shooter drills. Isn't that a problem for you?
I have no problem with safety drills. They increase the chances of being safe.
Mental health, bail, all that stuff you guys talk about doesn't address these problems.
Neither does this ATF rule.
We've got bills on the Democratic side to ban ghost guns. Who could be in favor of ghost guns?
I like them. I like them first.
They're illegal because they can't be traced. In fact, they're made so that law enforcement can't track down the people that use them.
That's not true. They are illegal because they don't want people to have easy access to firearms. You could build a firearm at home for our entire history, and even when serial numbers were required, you only had to add one if you sold it. The mythical ability to track every firearms is an evening crime show trope, not reality.
And I had one of my own. Let's raise the age up for people who want to use assault-style weapons. Let's raise it from 18 to 21.
If 18-year-olds are adults, they should be able to purchase any firearm someone 21 can purchase.
As we continue to be promiscuous in our allowance of guns in the hands of everyone, whatever kind of gun they want, throughout America,
I wish that was so.
I don't think it can be argued any longer that that the remedy for a wrongdoer with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
I don't know of any other way to stop a bad guy with a gun than with a good guy with a gun.
The gentleman on the other side of the aisle just described this apocryphal situation that doesn't really exist. And even the ATF and the DOJ and this rule say that situation doesn't exist.
Would the gentleman yield?
And look, yeah, has the gentleman been to a gun show and bought one of these guns?
I've been to a number of them, in Georgia and in Tennessee, and I see the same thing at all of these gun shows. I go, put my cap on, sometimes I'll put a fake beard on, and they still recognize me.
Are they like, is that that guy that thought Guam was going to tip over?
Well, I mean,
To your point, sir, I think Guam is a small island.
Very small island. My fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
We don't anticipate that.
It was called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act because Republican senators voted for it.
I just want to point out in my opening statement that Senator Tillis, who sponsored the Bipartisan Act that supposedly led to this, now opposes this rule.
We twiddle our thumbs and say, well, there's nothing that we can do. Well, there are evil people in the world. Of course there are. And we are the elected officials who were sent here to actually do something so that people could live a life of freedom in this country. It is not feeling like freedom when you are afraid.
Except that your proposals take away freedoms, and I think a populace should be more fearful of one that takes away freedoms for a feeling of safety.
Why is it that we can't have a substantive conversation about the fact that we seem to love our guns more in this country than we do our own children?
Protecting freedom that has been fought and died for outweighs the false feelings of safety, because in the end, you will be less safe by a potentially tyrannical government. That's all for today. Just wanted to go through this bit of debate on the rule. Let me know what you think of the video in the comments. Let me know if there's something I missed or some other debates or rules coming up that I should follow. Leave that in the comments below. If you've made it to the end of the video, please consider supporting me on Patreon, joining our Discord, liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel for more content. Thanks for watching.